So my name is Sid Parker, and this is my presentation for Japanese 235. So I'm going to be talking about the LGBT plus communities in Japan. I'm going to go over a couple of the modern issues, as well as talk about a little brief history. So just to start off with, what is exactly the LGBT plus community? So these usually include people who are not cisgender or heterosexual. Cisgender refers to people who identify with their given birth sex. But so this includes, but it's not limited to, lesbian, gay, bisexual, or trans people. However, there's a lot of other labels that people use to help better describe themselves and express themselves with, such as pansexual, or people who fall under the A spectrum, non-binary, gender fluid, etc., etc. So this community really celebrates the diversity of people, and they're very welcoming to a lot of people. So moving on, Japan's thoughts on LGBT plus community. So as New York Times author Dooley states, around 80% of Japanese individuals under the age of 60 do give their support. However, on the opposite end, you also have a lot of the traditionalists who don't quite agree with this lifestyle. This may possibly be due to after World War II, there was this big push for the nuclear family type with a mom and a dad and a kid. But another thing that might be throwing a wrench in this is Japan is currently having a steep birth rate decline, where their population is made up of more elderly people than younger people. And the government is really wanting people to have kids right now in their society. So LGBT plus laws in Japan. So as of 2021, there is no protection laws in place. And what this kind of means is if you get hired at a place and your boss later finds out that you're part of the LGBT plus community and he disagrees with it, he can fire you without any repercussions. Furthermore, this also means that landlords can kick you out, or doctors can refuse to take you in as a patient. So you can also legally change your gender, but not until after you've had reassignment surgery. And while this may seem good on paper, a lot of trans people may not necessarily have the funds to undergo reassignment surgery, or a couple of them might not actually want to do this surgery, and not being able to legally change your gender until after the surgery is kind of a hindrance. And then also, as of May 2021, same-sex marriage is not recognized by the Japanese government. So I think one of the larger issues of why it's hard to sort of talk about this in Japan is there's kind of a language barrier. A lot of the terms that I was using previously are kind of Western ideas. That's not to say these people don't exist in Japan. They just don't have the words to be able to describe themselves with. A couple of the words that I could find were most recognized in Japan were dasei, which refers to homosexual love, dasekon, referring to same-sex marriage, and then sekumai, which refers to, it's just the English abbreviation of sexual minority. And I think that without this ability to really delve deep into who the LGBT plus people are and what their community stands for, it's kind of slowing down the process of acceptance. So just going to jump straight into it. I'm going to go over LGBT plus history in Japan, or more so what Japan has sort of documented that may be considered queer. So while it's not exactly what one might expect, during Japan's Edo period, there was a time in a man's life where he was allowed to have sexual relationships with another man. Usually, however, these were usually young teenagers, sometimes young adults, but usually between the ages of 11 to their mid-20s was when these young boys sort of entered their wakashu period. And Today, this would not fly. There's a lot of these relationships where there is just a very large age gap, and this would be considered a little bit pedophilic in today's society, which is something the LGBT plus community actively discourages. But just to talk about it a little bit, because it is fascinating how being queer was just part of Japan's cultural history. But so yeah, like between the ages of 11 to 20s, usually there wasn't like a set age that the wakashu sort of came into being. It was just more so kind of when they started puberty, or but there's like people past their 20s as well who, after finishing puberty, just continued to be a wakashu. But so the wakashu were considered both attractive by men and women alike, and they had these unique clothes and hairstyles. One of the hairstyle that they sported was this. They had this bald patch right in the middle of their head, and then they folded their forelock hair over it into a tight man bun. But yeah, it was really interesting to research how they sort of presented themselves, where it was more important to be sort of this feminine, masculine sort of mix of what we might consider the masculine and feminine roles that we have associated with male and female gender. But so some historians actually consider this more to be like a third gender rather than it being a bisexual male or something perhaps transgender. But afterwards, usually the wakashu were not allowed to have relationships with men after they had finished with their wakashu period. Usually there would be a celebration, and while they then can pursue other wakashu, they were not allowed to pursue men. So this is why some historians might consider it, again, like a third gender. So women were not necessarily allowed like the same sexual freedoms as men. So there's not a lot about women during Japan's history that really gets talked about. However, I did find Japan's asobi, which is kind of a prostitute, but not really. While they did offer sexual services, a large part of their allure was also their talent in usually singing or puppeteering or dancing. But so these women would sail out onto lakes in boats, and that's how their customers would greet them. But after they, and it was actually pretty lucrative for them, but they would entertain their guests on the water, and it was actually mentioned that women also came in as guests, which is as close to documented lesbianism as I could find. So working with what we got. But yeah, it is said that while there were most women dedicated their lives to getting a husband and having that family style life, it is mentioned that some women still took part in homosexual acts during or before their marriage. So this has sort of bled into Japan's culture today. While it's not technically part of the LGBT plus community, it could possibly be read as queer coded. A lot of Japan's traditional not celebratory, but more of their traditions, such as no and kabuki plays, where there is only a male cast, and then you have those who kind of specialize in feminine roles, and then the opposite being the Takarazuka theater, where it's an all-female cast, which is really Western inspired. So they have these really big, bold dramas going on, and again, you also have these females who specialize in these masculine roles as well. And again, while it's not technically LGBT plus related, a lot of trans or queer people can identify with the characters and really sort of see a piece of themselves in Japan's culture, which I think is really wonderful. But so just to conclude, Japan has always had queer individuals, and while they haven't always felt quite welcome in Japan, Japan is, however, making an effort. Right now, there is the Equality Act, which is trying to be passed before the 2021 Olympics. And as of recently, in March, there was a very large rainbow parade in Tokyo, which it's really exciting to see such a wonderful country sort of embrace all of their citizens. And while America does also have a foot ahead of a lot of other countries, I think it's really important to see how everyone is coming together to really make queer communities and LGBT plus communities feel welcome and at home. Thank you for watching my presentation, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you. Bye-bye. Oh, and I almost forgot. Here also are my references that I used. Oh, thanks again for watching.